This video is proudly sponsored by NewType. Tools, accessories, model kits, these guys have it. Hop over to newtypehq.com and use the link below to help this channel out for future builds. Well, my dudes and dudettes, as 2025 come to a close, and most importantly, it is the holiday season, I definitely have had a lot of time to reflect as a father as well as a content creator. There are tons of projects that I want to do in 2026, a lot of commissions, lots of side projects I want to do with other content creators, and most importantly, definitely want to get back to making content on YouTube, but I need to take a breather. I need to take a step back and try something that is definitely out of my comfort zone. So you wonderful guys in the Gunpla community have hit me up with a unique challenge, and that was by all means a challenge upon itself. We're talking about the Home Depot R2-D2 replica. Now, this isn't a one-to-one scale R2-D2, but it is pretty darn close on what is out there in the market. It's under the right kind of price, between $300 to $400. I mean, it's pretty darn well detailed, and I'm actually really surprised that something like this actually exists. This is something I personally want to get for myself. But when I scroll down to the very bottom, I discovered that there is one dude that is literally selling it for $1,000. I was like, are you kidding me? It's already hard enough it is right now to try and survive in this economy, but you know what? I'm gonna take a breather. Soical Collectibles is coming out with their R2-D2. It's probably affordable. It's not gonna break the bank. It's not gonna hurt the general consumer. People are gonna say, oh, okay, you know what? Forget it. This sucks. I am a sucker for Star Wars. I love robots. I love mechs. There is no way, I repeat, there is no way I'm gonna shell out $1,000 to buy my all-time favorite. I end up buying the damn thing. Yo, what's going on, my dudes and dudettes, and welcome back to another exciting build, or should I say an exciting custom collectible from your boy, Otaku Builder. And man, this is something I've always wanted to do for a very long time. So now, before I start nerding out on this particular project, I need to point out some painting errors that were done on this particular Christmas display. For example, this rectangular square, it's not supposed to be blue, it's supposed to be a flat silver, much like how the dome color is. And this particular rectangular square, it's supposed to have a smaller rectangular square that resides inside it. Again, it is a very minor little detail that can be easily remedied when you do a custom paint job. Now, the holo projectors are a wrong color too. They're supposed to be more of a silver or a soft gray. Now, the front logic display, I'm not going to be too harsh on it. It is what it is. It looks great. It's rocking two LEDs that illuminate both squares. But the one thing I really like about this custom build is the sheer amount of customization that can be implemented on this wonderful Christmas decoration. If you don't like how the holo projectors look or the front optical display looks, you can easily have some dude do that on FC 3D print these parts for you. The market's out there. Now, when it comes to the particular color scheme, this is where things get kind of fun and interesting. For the main primer, I'll be using Restolo's gray primer, and as for the actual silver, I'm gonna go with a bright silver. I was hoping to get like a chromatic silver like you would see in the movie, but that particular paint is very hard to find, so this will do just fine. But speaking of difficult paints to find, this particular paint right here, my goodness, very difficult to find, going for like $30 to $40 at your local AutoZone. But the R2-D2 build community heavily recommends this particular color scheme and this particular paint to paint those panels, so we're gonna go with that. And other than that, let's get this boy disassembled and get it ready to be prime time painted. Alright, so now that we got all the electrical wiring finally out of this bad boy, it's time to get this guy prepped for painting. But before I do that, I'm going to use some rubbing alcohol to get all the accumulated grease, dirt, and grime that's been hitting this bad boy for a little bit over a month or two. And then once that's done, we can finally get started on hitting the primer onto this bad boy and make him look absolutely magnificent. Alright, so now that I've given this paint close to 2 to 3 hours to properly dry, it's now time to mask out the areas that are going to be needing the blue paint. So to do this, I'm going to be using some traditional blue masking tape that we normally use for painting inside interior houses or particular custom model kits. And then once that is prepped, I'll be hitting up with the blue paint, which will roughly take close to 10 to 12 hours to properly set and dry. Alright, my dudes and dudettes, the deed is done. I'm going to give it a double finger cross because I have never worked with this particular paint before because, man, this stuff stinks. So I'm going to let this bad boy sit for the next couple of 10 to 12 hours and then get back to it the next day to see how the results turn out. So it's the following day, and man, as you can probably tell, I was super eager to get back into the garage to see how the results turn out, and thankfully enough, they turned out great. The color separation between the blue and the silvers is on point like you would see in the movie version of R2-D2, and I'm very happy how that turned out. The color corrections were done for the back panels, they look great, and overall the paint application itself went down very smoothly, although I did notice when removing some of the paint that some of the blue paint did chip off. Now I'm not sure that's between the actual paint application or the silver applied on top of the blue. Whatever the case it is, that can easily be remedied by some custom touch-ups. Now overall, the color correction in the back side panels look great. As I mentioned before, areas that definitely were not painted correctly, I end up auto-correcting them themselves. Areas that I did miss those two circular balls. They're supposed to be painted blue, but I end up opting mounting them silver because I personally like it that way. But everything else looks great. Now for the eyepiece, like I did with the actual whole entire dome, I ended up custom painting with the actual blue and then masked out the eye. But I did notice that the eye looked kind of flat. It needed that nice glossy shimmering glow that you would see in the movie. Now overall it does get dirty over time, but I want to try to make it look nice and pristine. So I ended up using Mr. Hobby's clear gloss to make that bad boy popped out. So overall it looks great. There are also these little side panels down the corner that definitely need a little custom touch-up is there, but I'll leave that at the very end of the video. It's a small little detail, but it can easily be a remedy towards the very end. Now as for the entire body, I did not bother painting the whole thing white, but I did opt out to actually paint the remaining blue pieces with that nice stellar metallic blue. So everything else looks great. Now comes a nice little fine little detail, and that's adding the panel lining. Now this guy does not have any kind of panel lining whatsoever, but a lot of people in the community recommended these art tapes that you apply on the very side. They're very thin. All you need is basically just the tape itself and an X-Acto blade and you're good to go. Now as for the legs, I did try to experiment with doing some kind of weathering with the actual leg units. I did not like how the paint application looked, so I'm going to touch them up and make them look really nice and dirty towards the very end. So as I was finishing up this process, I had a deep thought. Is there anyone in the FC community that actually prints 3D parts for R2-D2 projects? And shockingly enough, there was one gentleman by the name of Junk Droids that actually has that. And he does fantastic 3D prints of the R2-D2 holo emitter as well as R2-D2's logic display. Now, these are vastly, and I mean vastly more superior looking than the one that comes from the Home Depot. But again, nothing wrong with the Home Depot one. If you like the way how they look and you don't want to do any custom work, that's good on you. But for me, I want to have that extra movie quality added to it. I want something that looks really authentic to what you see in the film prop. So that's why I went with this route. And not only these actually fully move and they're actually fully articulated, this is the way to go. Now, when it comes to actually applying the logic display, this part is actually really fun. Now, I could have easily just put a bright light through it and just be a one and done, but I want to go with the route like how the folks did it in ILM. I end up actually using a handful, and I mean close to like 150 to maybe 110 parts of fiber optic wiring. And this process, not only it's very expensive, but at the same time was extremely time consuming. So I'll leave this bit at the very end of the video to show you the process, how it turned out. Okay, so this next part is a bit of artistic freedom, so don't blow me up on the comments there. Now, I know there are tons of references out there for R2-D2, but there are one part in the very front of the actual hollow emitter where it's actually silver, or it's actually black, or dark gray. The rest of the emitters themselves will be painted a bright silver, where this one right here is going to be a custom flat black. Now, I'm not going to use any kind of regular flat black. I'm just going to use Mr. Hobby's black primer. This is sufficient enough to create the look I want, and this is going to get the job done the way how I envision it. But like I said, this is just a personal preference. If you want to go the route of making it actually silver the way you want it, you can do so on your own leisure when you do your own custom paint job. Okay, so after letting these parts dry for several hours, the final results, I have to say, are absolutely magnificent. Not only there is still a great range of articulation around the actual emitter itself, they look absolutely on point like we see in the actual full movie prop. Couldn't be happier. Now, the looming question you're probably asking yourself, how are you going to pull off that gaping hole that sits in the very middle? The actual one that comes with the actual prop is already done. You're good to go. So if you want to go this route, you don't have to do anything about it. But if you already convinced yourself of buying this 3D part, how are you going to pull off this part? Well, look no further. Junk Droid got you covered, because not only he actually recommends this particular LED, but not only that, this LED is actually 100% configured for this particular 3D print. I know, right? Genius. This guy went the extra length to do this project for us, and it actually shows. So what I end up doing with this, I end up lightly desaturating the actual translucent dome with a smoke gray, or I think it's a smoke black from Mr. Hobby, and then apply maybe like 3 to 4 coats on there, and then let it sit and dry for several hours. If you don't let the actual curation process do it correctly, it will eventually just chip off. But once you get the quality done, and after multiple applications, the final results look absolutely incredible. Now, when you apply this into the actual hollow emitter, take your time by not applying too much brute force. Just take your time and just gently, and I mean gently, push it through the aperture, and then the final results look absolutely amazing. And I mean amazing. Dude, it practically looks like an eye, and I couldn't be happier how the final results turned out. If I would scream like a little schoolgirl, I would, but I'll be waking up my son, so I'm not gonna do that. But I am super happy how this is turning out. This looks absolutely incredible, my dudes. Can't tell you how excited I am, man. This looks absolutely fantastic. Now comes the next challenging part. We're going to be applying some weathering techniques to it. Now, I am going to be using Mr. Weathering, I believe, black and brown. I definitely want to give it a nice dirty look, how R2 would be if he was on Tatooine or on the farthest moon of Endor from Star Wars: Return of the Jedi. Definitely want to hit up those areas that would apply like a lot of dirt accumulation, especially around the middle part of the joints, as well as parts around the feet. I'm also going to do a little bit of dabbing with some TP, toilet paper, to give a nice little texture with the weathering. Instead of that way, it looks like an airbrush ability, not ability, but an airbrush technique weathering. So I definitely want to create some like texture to it by adding one layer, dab, 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 scrape, and then apply an airbrush texture on top of that. So that way you get a nice even and a more authentic weathered look to it as it's being applied. Same things are going to be applied around the parts around the head, but I'm going to be very generous when it comes to the weathering there. Okay, so for this next part, this is a bit of a, I guess you could say, a hack that I did on my previous build many years ago with the Millennium Falcon. So I'm gonna dab my paintbrush with the weathering and then give it a nice little flick around the area. So that way it gives like a sense of like mud splattering, dirt accumulation around parts of the lower bottom part of R2-D2. And at the same time gives it more texture to the look and authenticity you would get from the R2. And then I'm gonna apply the exact same technique around parts around the dome. Not too much, just enough to give it a sense this guy's been through a lot in the fields of being an astro droid. And overall, the results should be great. So I'm literally halfway done building this guy and I had just the insane idea. You know what? This R2-D2 will look insane if he had like the authentic restraining bolt like you would see in A New Hope. And I hired a dude by the name of LSM Sabers to do a 3D printing of this guy for me. So to make it more authentic, I took the initiative of using an empty epoxy cup and then using Mr. Weathering dark gray and dark brown to give a sense that there's like a nice worn, torn area there to give a sense it's been there for a long time. And then once that sets and dry, and then I'll be hitting the whole entire build with a flat coat spray. And then once that sets and dry for several hours, I'll then put a very strong magnet behind there to lock it into place so that way it looks very authentic like you would see in the movie. Okay, so now we've reached the next chapter of this build, and now we're back to the logic display like I mentioned earlier on the video. Now, like I mentioned very briefly, these parts definitely need some TLC, and we're definitely going to do that to make them look absolutely magnificent. Now, like I mentioned before, these guys are going to be rocking 2 LEDs in the very front, which is fine, and I believe the power output is close to 5 volts. So to make this guy work, what we're going to end up doing is removing the housing here first, and then remove these LEDs off second. Now, I'm not going to disconnect the LEDs because the way how they are wired, I don't want to cause any kind of like any shortage or any kind of like electrical damage to what's being done. I'm gonna end up masking it with some electrical tape. But what I'm essentially gonna end up doing is take those LEDs out, and then once they're removed, I'm then gonna be applying close to 5 LEDs that resides inside the square. Now, the way I'm gonna do this effect is, if my memory is correct, it's not just a sequence of just one light blinking over another. It's like multiple sequences of different flashing lights going at different speeds, some bright, some very fast, some very slow. And this effect actually is pretty close like you would see in the movie version. Now, I know there are some experienced builders out there that end up putting like a full LED custom logic board display behind there, but once again, I'm going full ham on the way how the folks did it at ILM. I want to do the way how these guys did it back in the day to make it feel authentic. So that's what I end up doing. I use like a sequence of like multiple different colors of white blinking off and on in different sequences, some bright, some slow, some really slow, some bright. And then once I get everything housed in there, the effect looks absolutely wonderful. Now, once the LEDs are properly installed, it's now time to fully test these bad boys and see how they look. And overall, the results here are actually surprisingly really good. I wish I can cram more LEDs in there to just broaden out like the shimmering effect in there, but you know what? The 5 will do just fine. Now, when you apply the actual clear plastic on top of there, it looks fine the way it is, but it's missing that je ne sais quoi. It needs that oomph. Once again, Junk Droid at the rescue to applying these wonderfully designed stickers that sit very front of the logic display to create that authenticity. And once the application is done correctly, man, oh man, mwah, it looks great. It's closer to what you would get from movie quality, and at the same time, it's not as accurate to get from a full LED display, but you know what? I am extremely happy how this looks. Now, let's talk about the logic display in the back. Now, I mentioned briefly in the video, I end up using tons, and I mean a lot of fiber optics to pull off this look, because once again, I'm going the route how ILM did it back in the day. Now, this is a very, and I mean very challenging and stressful process because not every fiber optic is made the same. I ended up getting these from Evans Designs, and they actually create the look themselves just fine, but I was really scrapped on time, so I ended up buying half of them off of Amazon. So the ones I have here are just fine. Now, once again, for the LED light sequences, I'm going to do the exact same thing like I did with the front display. Each LED is going to be firing off in a different rate, some fast, some slow, some really fast. Now, once that is done and applied on there, I'm going to do a quick test to see how the effect looks. Now, when it comes to the actual colors for the actual logic display, it's going to be a combination between soft orange, blues, greens, and reds from what I've seen from the references. And that's going to be definitely a problem, but at the same time a challenge when he's going to try to illuminate every single fiber optic tubing. Now the way all these guys need to be positioned, they can't be positioned too close, they can't be positioned too far, because it's going to leave gaps. So it needs to be done in a circular pattern. So the first test you see right here, it looks just fine, but we can make it a little bit more better. So I ended up using a spare cap from my custom paints that I did many years ago, and use that as a cap to sit in the very front, cut the bottom part off in the very back so that way it can act as an aperture to disperse the lights correctly. And then I'm going to take that part itself, mask it with electrical tape so I can block out any light bleeding, and then once everything is residing there nice and snug, I'm going to then connect it back again to the fiber optics to create that illusion once again. Now how did the illusion turn out? Oh my god, extremely better than I imagined. Now the position of these is still off, so when I end up having to rotate just like maybe 40 or 90 degrees, it creates the illusion perfect, just like how you would see in the movie. I couldn't be happier how this turned out. Extremely happy. Now this is said and done, I now can connect this bad boy into the R2-D2 unit and finish this bad boy with a strong finish.